Hey everybody, Blue here, welcome back. So I'm going to be bringing you our deck profile for Strings. This deck has not changed much since its original debut many years ago. He's a character where luckily they did print essentially all of his cards, especially the ones his Slifer strategy. So the deck of course is based on, it has like a slime jam theme to it via his monsters, but the deck really is orientated around Slifer. So Strings, really being a puppet, mind controlled by Marik, played really through Marik what presumably Marik came up with as the ultimate deck specifically for Slifer. So again, our deck for him is mostly cards that he played. A few cards we threw in to fill in some empty spaces that were left when via a overall lack of cards played. But this deck does have a nice feel to it. Again, it is almost all of his cards. And the cards that we did throw in kind of tried to look off his own cards and some of their hunters for, the inspiration. So starting off is 3 Humanoid Slime. This deck, I'll tell you again, is going to be a lot of 3-ofs. So don't expect too much originally. A lot of their hunter characters really have decks with 3-ofs. So that's kind of just the way they're built so that we get 40 cards and their cards. We don't shoot for too many individual cards because that would leave a lot of spaces up to just fill the blank cards. So Humanoid Slime is the first one up. A whopping 2,000 defense, but used primarily as a fusion piece. Followed by Shining Abyss was one of our throw-ins, especially because it makes an appearance later, actually played by rare hunters, so we felt it wasn't too misplaced. And then continuing on is Worm Drake, the last of his normal monsters, and actually only really has a few monsters. His deck is weak in that it really has one strategy that revolves around Slifer, and without Slifer, his deck is incredibly vulnerable. It has very few ways, if any, to really make a comeback. So Worm Drake, the other fusion piece in addition to Humanoid Slime, whereas Humanoid Worm Drake fusion, that's it. So moving on is the fun card, Revival Jam. Made its debut with Strings, later seen again with Marik, as Marik seemed to have a few of the cards that had been played by his subordinates. So Revival Jam, bearing our errata sticker, is a card that we've changed, and actually, while it had a previous erratum, what I'm about to tell you is its current newest erratum, something that Delta and I recently looked over to make the deck, make the card play even more like the anime. The first thing we did years ago was throw out the 1,000 life point cost. It's ridiculous to have to pay 1,000 life points for this effect, really, because it's good but not that good. I mean, it was a very early printed card, so yes, the cost was there, but as far as like current meta, last few years of meta, and especially with our anime decks, 1,000 life point cost had to go. Now, what we've done is taken it one step further, where originally, like I just said, we omitted the 1,000 life point cost, but still was throwing back on the standby phase like it's printing. Currently, the way we're using Revival Jam is that if it is destroyed by battle, or if it's destroyed by a monster effect which targets it, and I'll get to that in a second, you can special summon it back from the graveyard immediately. So now, when we play this card, it does have its immediate resurrection ability to just reform on the spot. And that whole line about targeted by monster effect is not something that was specifically present in the anime. However, it's designed so that it falls in line with Slifer. Because not too long ago, Delta and I decided to errata Slifer so that his effect counts as a target. And this was done so that Slifer can interact with the magnet cards that were used in the ceremonial battle decks. Because of course we were also happy when Konami printed more cards from the original anime, especially from the ceremonial battle, the series finale duel. Unfortunately, those cards did not work with Slifer the way they did in the anime, which ended up being the undoing of essentially those Egyptian God monsters. So we tweaked Slifer so that his effect counts as a target, and sometimes in the anime they actually did portray an effect which targets. They did kind of portray it as an attack, even if it truly wasn't. So taking that into consideration, Slifer would now target Revival Jam if Revival Jam was summoned to the opponent's field. So while not a complete mirror from the anime, we did want to kind of get, some of that aspect and that detail into the card effects. So going on though, 3 card of safe returns, and definitely not plugging that one's anime effect. It would be nice, but we feel definitely unnecessary. 3 diffusions. We want to give him a little bit more fusion support to go with his fusion monster, so he had a few options. But overall, again, the deck has a very linear strategy that does not count for much else. Gold Sarcophagus. So, when you only have one Slifer in a deck that is made to summon Slifer, revolves around supporting Slifer, and when you're not in an anime where you're scripted to draw your card in the beginning of the duel, Gold Sarcophagus is what we use to get Slifer to the duelist faster. Now, for those of you who've been watching us for a while, you may recall the last time you saw Gold Sarcophagus, we had errated it to its anime effect, which is very different. This was for the ceremonial battle duels, because its anime effect was that you can play this card, hide a card from your deck into the Gold Sarcophagus, and should your opponent play it later in the duel, you can reveal it from the Gold Sarcophagus to negate your opponent's activation of that card. And this was absolutely crucial, and it's what helped Yugi win the ceremonial duel. But ultimately we felt that it's a very restrictive effect, and we have other decks where we were using Gold Sarc for its printed effect, TCG effect. So we have since let go of that errata, which was very nice for the time, in lieu of it being more practical in several decks than in the one deck. So Gold Sarc, bottom line, no errata, no sticker, play it like it says on the paper. Infinite cards, 3 of. So next card on the list is Jam Breeding Machine. 3 copies, 1 small change. We've done away with the last line of the card, which says monsters cannot be summoned while this card is face up on the field. And this is incredibly important because in the anime, Strings and Marik offered away the Jam Breeding Machine when they attributed the tokens. So there is that. However, also, not being able to summon monsters includes special summoning, and unfortunately that includes Revival Jam. In the anime, it wasn't destroyed, it was reformed, but Revival Jam protecting these tokens would be effortless if Revival Jam could not be summoned back to the field. So it's that we've done away with the card's effect that it prevents you from summoning, as well as that when you tribute the tokens, the card goes as well, so it stops producing the tokens. It's almost like, it puts out tokens, but once you use them, the whole system's gone. So there's just some changes that we made to kind of restore the card back to its anime gameplay and fit it in with, real-world mechanisms. A monster born in a deck never really hurts. It's just a great throw-in, especially with 1 copy of Slifer. It could give you that one chance to get it back and hopefully win. Nightmare Steel Cage. So like Seeker, he was packing a stall card, a little different for him. I actually really liked Nightmare Steel Cage. I thought it was kind of cool because it was more sinister than Swords. So really happy when it was eventually printed. 3 Polymerization. And lastly, 2 Pot of Greed. Again, a deck that needs to draw to get Slifer, draw to support Slifer, with very little backbone. Having the 2 Pot of Greeds, in addition to the card of safe return with Revival Jam, does make it easier to get to where you need to. But of course, still, now with Revival Gems being errated, the card of safe return can be a downfall of the player, like in the anime. The trap lineup is incredibly basic as well. 3 Jam Defender, the only trap card that Strings really played. I mean, of the traps on the deck, the one he played. Again, another card that we saw. So we saw Marik come back later with the Revival Jam and the Jam Engine. What made the Revival Jam successful was that it was able to block any attack because it was indestructible. So the last card is, as I alluded to, not a card used by Strings, rather used by Marik, but we felt it was helpful in Strings' deck because it does fit the slime theme, in the name and the card appearance a little bit. And because it is a 3000 wall, it is very helpful to a deck, which again, I cannot stress enough, can very easily fail and fall apart given its incredibly linear strategy. So Metal Reflect Slime helps him, gives him more defense than tokens, than a stall spell, than his 2200 attack fusion, which is obviously next. Now we only went with 2 despite there being 3 polymerizations and 3 diffusions. So those were more for consistency. It helps fill out his deck. It makes it more consistent he can draw his fusions. We didn't want his deck to become too heavy on summoning his fusion though. Especially with 3 polymerization and 3 diffusion, he could make this monster enough times we felt he didn't even need 3 copies. Unless he truly did lose one. So this is Strings' deck. It's a fun deck to play, especially if Slifer is one of your preferred the Egyptian gods. But overall, it's not something that you should expect to really get a lot of variety out of. But if you did like that duel, it is fun to kind of go through and replay the same steps. But definitely stay tuned for more duels and deck profiles coming from us from Battle City Story Arc.